Hi everyone, Megashows here, bringing you another Doctor Who 5-inch scale action figure review, and today we're going to be taking a look at an all-new character for the 5.5-inch scale action figure line, and this is the Amazon exclusive Bill Potts figure. Now I got this figure recently from Amazon for $15.99. This is also one of two Bill Potts variants that have been released recently, the other one being part of the B&M exclusive 12 Doctor figure set from this year, and that particular version uses the same sculpt as this figure but with different paintwork for the clothing. Now the packaging for this figure is pretty much the same as it is for the other single-carded Doctor Who Collector Series figures out there, even though a lot of the Doctor Who action figure and toy packaging lately has been gearing towards the new series with the more recently updated Doctor Who logo, the new TARDIS and the new and different colour scheme. The packaging for these figures has more or less stayed the same. So at the top we get a classic Doctor Who logo, which has always been used for the Collector Series figures, even for those that have been in the show a bit more recently. Below that we get a clear plastic bubble showing the figure, and at the bottom we obviously get the name of the figure. On one of the sides you get more of the plastic bubble again with a little QR code, which I presume takes you to a character or Doctor Who website. And then on the other side we get the Doctor Who logo and the name of the figure once again. On the back, because this figure is a standalone release and it's not part of an assortment like the good old 5-inch scale figures that we saw a few years ago, the packaging is pretty much just dedicated to the character of Bill Potts. So on one side you get a bit of info about her and her history with the Doctor, and then we also get a picture of her on the side and one of her quotes just below that as well. And then below that we get the same usual product and company information. So, even though Bill Potts is a completely new character for the Doctor Who action figure line, this particular figure, like the Rory Williams figure from Series 5, released back in 2012, is actually made from heavily recycled parts from a Primeval action figure. And with the case of the Bill Potts figure, the sculpt of this one mainly comes from the Primeval Series 1 Abby Maitland figure, which was released way back in 2007 or 2008. Now, the Rory Williams figure, much like this one, was a repaint for the most part, but there were some newly sculpted parts. So in the case of this figure, we get a new head sculpt, and I think possibly the arms are different this time as well. And the Rory figure also had a additional body warmer sculpted over the top of Nick Cutter's jacket. But other than that, this figure is pretty much just the same as the original Primeval figure, but repainted, like how the Rory figure was. Now I have to say right off the bat, one of my favourite things about this figure is definitely the head sculpt. There have been a few Doctor Who action figures from character over the past few years that I'd say have just missed the mark in terms of the likeness to the actors they've been based on, but I'd say they've nailed the likeness to Pearl Mackie with this one. I absolutely loved the way the hair has been sculpted. You can see there is a little bit of light brown shading within the hair, and I just think the big spiky sculpt of it is absolutely fantastic. It's just also got the detail of the orange ribbon within the hair as well, which is okay, but some of the paint has slipped onto the rest of the hair, unfortunately. But that aside, I think this is an excellent head sculpt. I think they don't really need to use any other head sculpts for Bill Potts figures for the foreseeable future, and it is obviously the one that they've used for the B&M exclusive version as well. I've seen a little bit of disappointment towards the facial expression. Personally, I don't have much of a problem with it. It's not a overly blank expression, but it would be nice if we do get more in the future for them to perhaps do some different facial expressions as well, just to change them up a bit. Moving down to her top now, we can see that this is the one that she wore in a lot of the promotional images for Series 10, as well as the pilot, I believe. It looks really nice for the most part. It's got a lot of bright and dark coloured stripes, as well as the painted detail of some buttons on the front, which I think probably would have been sculpted if this was made from an entirely new mould, but I think it's nice that they've been painted on anyway, just to add a little bit of extra detail, and the existing creases on it are really nice, help to make the figure look just that little bit more lifelike. But I have got quite a big problem with this, and that is within the paintwork. Now, I'm not talking about the colours of the stripes, but I'm talking about the way it's just all been painted, really. You can see that there are loads of points where there's paint where there shouldn't be. There's lots of bits where the paint has slipped off the stripes onto some of the others, and it just looks a lot more messy than I expected it to be, which is a real shame because I've seen a lot of other people online saying that they've had similar problems with this figure, and I think given that this figure is £6 or £7 more than what Doctor Who action figures used to be, at least before the 5-inch figure line started to decline, this really isn't something I would be expecting from a figure of a higher price point. I understand it's made from an older sculpt, and I'm fine with that, but paint like this really isn't something I expect from a figure like this, especially when it's branded as part of a collector series. I know you could say that I could look for another one, or I could have waited for it to be reduced maybe, but I could just as easily run into another one with paint problems just like mine, if not worse. So sadly, it is something that is happening with a lot of these figures. And given that it is pretty much just an online exclusive at the moment, it's just kind of a lottery as to how the paint is on yours if you do choose to get this figure. I wouldn't say this is something that should put you off getting the figure. It's definitely something to be wary of though, and it is disappointing to see that a lot of people have had this problem. But should this figure be released again in the future on its own or as part of a set, hopefully these paint issues can be a little bit more infrequent. The trousers are exactly the same as they were on the Abby Maitland figure, just painted black instead of light blue this time. They've got some nice bits of sculpted detail, like all the creases going down from the top towards the boots, some pockets on the sides, a button at the top there, and some more pockets on the back as well. Fortunately, I haven't got any paint issues with these trousers. It's just more a slight issue with the sculpt in that these trousers did sit a bit higher on bill in the show, and this is just one of those cases where a old sculpt for a completely different character doesn't quite match up with the look of a new character that it's based on. But still, they are really nice with all the sculpted detail that they have. And then lastly, taking a look at the boots, I haven't really got much to say about these really. They've been painted quite nicely with a light turquoise and then completely white for the laces. You can also see from the front that one is slightly different to the other, and they have also got some nicely sculpted creases at the back. I really like the shading on these as well. You can see towards the bottom of them they aren't completely squeaky clean, so it does make them look quite well used and maybe a little bit worn as well. Now, because this particular figure of Bill uses a older sculpt of another character, this particular figure isn't quite as articulated as some of the more recent Doctor Who action figures, but it still does have some quite good posability. Her head can do a full 360-degree turn. The arms can go all the way back at the shoulders, you just have to mind the hair. The arms also have a bicep swivel joint where they can turn 360 degrees. The arms can go up and down at the elbows, but as you can see, she hasn't got any wrist articulation. But given that she's got the swivel joint higher up on the arm, I don't really think that's a problem really. She has got a waist joint where she should be able to turn a bit, but as you can see on my figure, it doesn't really want to move. And then the legs have the standard articulation where they can move outwards from the top, go backwards and forwards on the top, bend at the knees, and also the boots can turn 360 degrees as well. So this particular figure may not have as much articulation as some of the other Doctor Who 5-inch scale action figures we've seen in recent years, but I think the articulation for this one is pretty much just okay the way it is really. If there was some new sculpted parts, I think they could have done perhaps ball jointed shoulders and maybe wrist swivel joints as well. That being said, I always think joints like that are always much better on figures of characters that are wearing jackets or coats like this 12th Doctor figure here. So in fairness, the articulation, even though it might not give this particular figure as much posability as some of the others out there, I still think it is pretty good, and it is certainly a lot more than what we got on some of the early Doctor Who action figures from character. And just to give you some idea of the size and scale of this figure, here we have it next to one of the 11th Doctor figures from Series 6, released back in 2011, and one of the 12th Doctor variants released last year. Now, I'm all for action figure companies reusing old sculpted parts and moulds, sometimes for a new variant of a character or a completely new character. They can actually be used surprisingly well, especially when they've been repainted. However, that being said, I think unfortunately with the case of this Bill Potts figure using the Primeval Series 1 Abby Maitland figure sculpt, I think this particular figure of Bill Potts and the B&M exclusive variant is a little bit too short. Certainly next to the 12th Doctor figure, I think she is definitely quite short. She is quite tall, not quite as tall as the 12th Doctor, but I think certainly having these figures next to each other, this particular one does seem quite short. So if we are to get more figures of Bill Potts in the future, whether they're in the 5-inch scale line or any other line character choose to do, a Bill Potts figure should definitely be a lot closer to the height of the 12th Doctor. Again, not quite to the top, but definitely taller than this. So hopefully in future maybe they can make some new sculpted parts to make her a bit taller, or perhaps use parts from another sculpt of a slightly taller character. Okay, so now the time has come for me to give my verdict on this figure. Overall, I think the Doctor Who Amazon exclusive Bill Potts figure is a pretty good addition to my Doctor Who action figure collection. I think they've nailed the likeness of Pearl Mackie within that head sculpt. If they were to give us some more Bill Potts variants in the future, I'd be totally fine with them using this head sculpt again. Would be nice if they changed the facial expressions just to change things up a bit, but if it was just to stay the same, I'd be totally fine with that. The outfit, obviously because it comes from the Primeval Series 1 Avi Maitland figure, may not be 100% accurate in the sculpt, but the detail on it is really nice and the way that it has been painted for the most part is really good, except on the top, which is where a lot of people, including myself, have experienced some pretty noticeable paint errors, which given the RRP of this figure, I wouldn't have expected to be there, and I really do hope that if this figure is to be re-released or any other figures use this particular sculpt in the future, that they don't have paint errors as obvious or as common as they are with this one. And my main issue with this figure really comes in the scaling, again because of the recycled sculpt from the Primeval Avi Maitland figure. I do feel this one is just a little bit too short, so hopefully with future Bill Potts figures they either use parts from another sculpt of a taller character, or perhaps we do get some new parts just to make this figure a little bit taller for the 12th Doctor figures. Still, I'm really pleased to finally have a Bill Potts figure to go with my 12th Doctor figures, and if you are thinking about getting this figure, I think it's definitely one to get sooner rather than later, given that she is a character that we've never seen in the 5-inch scale action figure line before. And from me, this particular figure of Bill Potts gets a well-earned 8 out of 10. This is a really nice figure, especially when it comes to the head sculpt and the sculpted detail, but I think the paintwork and the sculpting do let this one down a bit, unfortunately. It's not the worst figure, but it certainly could be a lot better, and I hope that we do see some more Bill Potts variants in the future in different costumes, so that hopefully they don't have the same flaws that this particular figure has. And that is pretty much it for my review of the Doctor Who Amazon exclusive Bill Potts figure. Hope you've all enjoyed watching this review. If you want to share your thoughts on this figure, you can do so in the comment section below. Not decided what my next Doctor Who action figure review is going to be of yet, but I think it may very well be this particular 12th Doctor variant from last year. But if there are also any others that I haven't reviewed already and you'd like to see me review them, you can also let me know about them in the comments section too. And yeah, thanks for watching this review guys, and I will see you again soon.